Hi, today we're going to look at popular versus scholarly articles and a few things in between when to use them. Let's take an example of someone who is researching how important it is to increase fish in your diet. Okay, that's a popular question. Uh, and that student goes over and pulls out Prevention Magazine. Now, Prevention Magazine is something that you might find in your doctor's office or at the barbershop in the waiting area because it's popular. The stories are engaging, they're fresh, they're interesting, and they are written at such a level that anybody can pick this up. It's considered a popular source, probably not the best for a college paper. But you could also pick out something from Nutrition Reviews. This is a peer-reviewed journal. Everything in here is going to be, you can tell by the charts, research-based. Now, these are the two extremes, popular versus scholarly. Others that might be interesting, all right, Nutrition Today. Well, that could be good, but this you have to see. All right, this has got references in it. It's kind of in between, perhaps authoritative. American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, scholarly, right? The Cornell Hospitality Quarterly, perhaps not as interested in nutrition as in service and serving. Same thing, Cook's Illustrated, great recipes, but not a scholarly journal. The list of scholarly journals really is quite long if you go into our databases. But that will give you some picture. There is a large number of articles that you can pull from scholarly journals. You can use print sources if they are considered scholarly. Now, you can also find articles about medical issues in Oprah magazine, but again, written for the common person. Doesn't mean that you're less of a person to read it. It's a great magazine. Same thing for Vogue or USA Today. Great popular stories, but they might be useful if you're writing a speech on popular ideas. Now, the Journal of American Medical Association, highly credible, highly authoritative, scholarly. Now, what about if you're writing a paper on business? Could you use something like the New York Times? Well, yeah, you could use the New York Times for news items on businesses, perhaps stories on mergers or on the stock market, and even more authoritative would be the Wall Street Journal. So because it has the word journal on here, you might think, well, then it must be scholarly. Not necessarily so, but it could be authoritative. So let's break this down a little bit better. We have these categories: popular, and popular would be social media. It could be newspapers, magazines. So a wide variety of things. The things most common that will come across in social media would be these articles. You know, these are popular. They're written at such a level. They could be good, but there again, they are probably not your best sources. If you find websites that end with the extension .com or if they're blogs, I would be very suspicious of whether you could use those. Well, let's take another example. Let's say you are writing a paper for your philosophy department and taking a religion course, and you want to write on the topic of grace. All right, we're going to break this down. Now, you could reach over for National Geographic and find some interesting articles, historical, based on archaeology. But again, they're written at such a level that we would consider these popular articles and popular sources. So we couldn't use that. What if you took a book that was written by someone who wrote all about grace in his life, and here's a story of Tony Dungy, and this is it says #1 New York Times bestseller. You would think I could use this. Well, it's not based on any type of scholarship. It would be interesting, and you could use it as a hook to bring people in to your discussions. But this is not going to have what you need. You could look into something called the a ready reference. For example, this Routledge Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Is it authoritative? Yes. Based on scholarship? Yes. It's not something I would normally use, but it falls into that middle category of reference. And when you find these encyclopedias or dictionaries, we consider those ready reference. You can use those for your papers, but I wouldn't depend on those. Those are considered not primary sources or even secondary sources, probably tertiary sources. You could look into a book on theology. Now, would theology be considered a primary source? Not really. It's based, and here's something to also consider. Whenever you're looking at anything that's published, it's going to have plenty of bias in one way or the other. I could have pulled several theology books off the shelf today and found that they would have very different ideas of the concept of grace. Some things may be in common, but depending on who's writing this and how their own particular views of the world, their cosmology, their philosophy, and some of the conclusions they come up with, the ideas could be very different. So if you use something like this, you probably need to use more than one and compare the different types of biblical theology or philosophy that they may be using, and note the differences, the biases in them. You could use a Bible commentary. Now, is a Bible commentary scholarly? Well, it depends on the Bible commentary. Some are written for the common person, and so the language again is uh, much more basic, much more accessible. Something like this particular one will include plenty of original language words and some word studies, and you might consider this a scholarly publication, and you could use this. And so it falls in the category of somewhat like reference, between reference and authoritative works that you could use, but not if you're thinking specifically of scholarly material. This could be, but it's a little bit in the gray area, I think, depending on what your goals are. There are dictionaries. Now, dictionaries, again, just like the encyclopedia, is going to have some bias, and also in this particular one, Dictionary of Methodism, if I looked up some information here, I probably would find out that this particular book has a particular bias. It tells you right up front, Methodism, and so it's going to be helpful as a ready reference. So this would fit on the category of authoritative. Uh, Another one that you see a lot, I see a lot of people, this is a very popular book, Rick Warren, Purpose Driven Life. So he talks about grace, and this is through the eyes of Rick Warren. Not a bad book, but it's not going to necessarily give you what you need to write a scholarly paper. Dictionaries, and again, I mentioned encyclopedias. There's another one, Britannica. You know, Encyclopedia Britannica has been around a long time, and you can find some excellent articles. Now, they're based on scholarship, but this is really not the best way to go. So, this is how I break down the hierarchy for you. Popular sources would be those like magazines, social media, blogs. Probably best to steer away from those when you're writing an academic paper, unless your academic paper is about popular religiosity or about social media. The other is authoritative. It could be commentaries. It could be the Wall Street Journal, for example. It could be a very good authority on stock market. It would tell you some things about what the actual facts, how particular stock markets fared on a particular days, and if some stock is going good or bad, or some information on businesses. You may find that that'd be helpful if you're writing a paper on business. Reference works would be encyclopedias, dictionaries. Now, Wikipedia is not something I would ever use. And the reason is twofold. One, it's never a stable entity, so it can be changed at any time. Number two, we don't know who's writing these papers and whether they have the information necessary to give a scholarly view on any type of topic. So I would steer away from those type of things. So, .coms, .orgs are a little iffy, could be authoritative, but, reference, some of the reference things that would be helpful would be anything that will give you statistics. Now, some .govs like cdc.gov would be good. Those would be very good to help you with statistics on demographics, any of those type of things. Now, then there's a category I haven't mentioned before, and that's common knowledge. Common knowledge, you really don't have any place to go to for that. I mean, this comes from whatever is reported widely. In general, that the sky is blue and water, is made out of H2O. So you don't have to quote somebody for really commonly known things. So when you're writing a paper and you come across common knowledge, you can use it, but you don't have to cite it. And then the highest category would be research-based information. Those are scholarly articles. Now, even scholarly articles, as good as they can be, can also have strong bias to them. So, when you look at scholarly articles, don't pull just one. It's good to have several samples of particular views on a topic, and then you come up with a conclusion on your own, based on your own expertise, a little bit of intuition. You look at the evidence and then try to decide how that evidence will help you with the conclusion. So if you think about it this way, PARCS is this: popular, authoritative, reference, common knowledge, and scholarly. If you can remember those categories, you can probably do pretty well when you're composing your paper. So we'll see you next time. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.